everyone. My name is Ram Chandra. I have been working in the IT industry for the last 18 years. Basically, started my career back in 1997. I've been working as a programmer, a developer, an analyst, and then moved on to databases. So I have worked on various flavors of databases, right from Sybase to IBM DB2 on the mainframe, Oracle, SQL Server. So I'm a certified DB2 expert as well. Over the last few years, I have switched careers, and I have now started working as a data architect for a US-based company. In the meantime, I am also a certified TOGAF architect. I've been working on TOGAF and its concepts over the last 5 to 6 years. Database is my expertise, and I use a lot of features of TOGAF in my day-to-day job. So specifically, data architecture and enterprise data management is kind of a hot thing today in the market because you see a lot of talk about big data, Internet of Things, and all that. So information management or information data management is kind of critical to every business. TOGAF provides a framework to implement those concepts because TOGAF has various components that we will talk about in a few minutes. This session on TOGAF is more oriented towards the foundation of how TOGAF is, what is in TOGAF, what are the advantages of using TOGAF, what are the various methods and procedures that TOGAF provides us, and all that. So to talk about the certification a little bit, TOGAF, to get TOGAF certified, there are 2 levels you need to clear. Just also to give you a brief background, TOGAF is a concept that was developed back in the 1990s, and over the years it has evolved, and the group is called the Open Group. It's an open source group that's readily available on the web. So once you clear your TOGAF certification, you ideally get access to that Open Group website or Open Group, you can say blog. There are various documentations provided in the Open Group, which are from various industry experts who are kind of into chief architect kind of role in various organizations around the world. So to get certified, you have 2 levels. One is the foundation level, and then the second part is the TOGAF certified level, which basically, so the foundation level is basically simple kind of multi-choice test that you need to clear. You have around 40 questions, and I believe that if I'm not mistaken, you need to get around 48 of them correct. But the second level of the exam, the TOGAF, is more oriented towards concepts that you have to implement. So you basically will be provided with various case studies, and you need to pick and choose the right answers for those case studies. And then the second part is kind of a little bit tricky in the sense you need to have a thorough understanding of all the basic plus the advanced concepts. So let's start with the session. This probably is going to be more of a session for an hour or so. So this is just the introduction, and I will probably be covering a couple of chapters of basic TOGAF. So the first slide is basically talking about several terms and acronyms that TOGAF uses. So some of them are listed here. One is the application architecture, the architecture building block. The architecture building block is something that we will well into detail because a building block is something that we need to understand thoroughly in TOGAF, because building blocks are what we call reusable objects from an application or an enterprise architecture standpoint. So building block kind of becomes, if you ideally think about any application development life cycle, you always try to use reusable components. So building blocks basically are reusable components that you can use in your enterprise architecture framework. The next acronym is basically, you can see something called as ADM, the architecture development. So the architecture development method is kind of the heart, you can say the heart or the brain of the TOGAF concept. So the architecture development method has various phases in it. So we will go into the details of each phase and what each phase outlines. And then you have the architecture framework, the baseline framework, the business architectures, the capability architectures, the data architectures, the enterprise continuum, the foundation architecture. We will go into the details of these, but I just wanted to put a slide together to see what are all the acronyms that we would use today in TOGAF. So when you look at the Foundation Study Guide overview, the first chapter is basically an introduction to TOGAF 9. The second chapter is basically basic concepts. Chapter 3 covers the core concepts. 4 is basically the key terminology that's used in TOGAF 9. And then chapter 5 is an introduction to the architecture development method, which basically is the core of TOGAF. And if you understand the architecture development method, you basically are guaranteed that you can implement each of those phases in your organization. And then the enterprise continuum and tools. So this is another concept that is really important for TOGAF. This basically talks about all the reference models that are available out there. And so the reference models are nothing but, you can say, building blocks that have already been published or available for organizations to reuse. So the enterprise continuum provides a basic foundation for you to start your organizations. Then chapter 7 is in detail about ADM phases. The chapter 8 is talking about ADM guidelines and techniques. What basically this talks about is what you need to do in order to implement a best practice approach for TOGAF. I mean, what ADM guidelines is nothing but it's a framework that TOGAF provides. It's like a meta model, or you could say a repository where you want to store all of your enterprise architecture building blocks. So TOGAF, if you look at an entire picture of TOGAF, TOGAF is not a tool. TOGAF is basically providing you a framework. It guides you as to what the best practices are, but it doesn't actually tell you you need to use this tool for this particular kind of development. You need to use tool B for a construction project or tool C for an IT project. So it doesn't talk a whole lot about tools, but it provides you a framework and gives you some guidance on what kind of approach you need to take when you start and initiate in your organization for enterprise architecture. Chapter 9 is more about architecture governance. So once you have an enterprise architecture initiative, it's not just that you start an initiative and then continuously work on it. You need to have some governance where you identify a set of people or a group of people who are identified as stakeholders and who basically are also members of a board that governs your enterprise architecture framework. Chapter 10 is about views, viewpoints, and stakeholders. So basically, this is more of, so if you look at TOGAF, the way I look at TOGAF is, so TOGAF basically provides you a concept where, say you have a problem, right? So TOGAF basically tells you, how do I resolve this problem? So where does the problem originate? The problem basically originates either from your business users or it comes from stakeholder. Stakeholder is nothing but either a business sponsor or an IT sponsor or an executive sponsor. So if a stakeholder has a concern, then you basically need to provide either a view or a viewpoint, basically telling how am I going to resolve a stakeholder's problem. So that's what chapter 10 is all about. Chapter 11 is about building blocks, which I've covered earlier beginning of this session. And 12 is ADM deliverables, and then 13 is the TOGAF reference models, which basically falls under the enterprise continuum. So as I talked about before, so the foundation certification is in 1 hour computer-based test with 14 multiple choice questions. So these are basically the distribution of how the one our test is going to be. And so if you look at it, radiant basis covers at least 20 to 30% of it, has around 9 questions, and then the rest are distributed among each of the chapters that I just discussed. So let's dive into chapter 2 and talk about some of the key points regarding what is TOGAF, what is an enterprise, what is enterprise architecture, and then why do you need an enterprise architecture in an organization, and then what is architecture in the context of TOGAF, what is an architecture framework, why do I need a framework, why is TOGAF suitable as a framework for enterprise architecture, what does TOGAF contain, and what are the different types of architecture that TOGAF deals with. So as I said earlier, TOGAF is an architecture framework. So basically, the way I look at TOGAF is, if you briefly, if I have to summarize TOGAF, so I have a vision. So to get that vision accomplished, you need to apply certain steps. So the way I look at TOGAF is, TOGAF gives you a vision, TOGAF provides you then within TOGAF you need to look at how your baseline is. So what is your current state of your systems or your enterprise architecture practice? And then you need to decide upon what your target should look like. And then based on your baseline and the target, you need to look at, you need to perform a gap analysis to find out what is missing between your baseline and the target. And then the next step is, what are my choices to accomplish this target, right? So once you have a target in mind, you need to have some kind of vision to come up with strategies or policies or procedures to attain that target goal. And then you need to, how do I attain that target goal? Once you have the choices, you need to put a roadmap to determine the timelines. You need to communicate or talk with your project management office. You need to talk to several vendors about accomplishing these choices. So you need to put together a roadmap. So once you have a roadmap, which basically talks about the various steps to implement your choices, then you need to talk about how you want to implement it. So what are the processes that I need to develop? What are the processes that I can use from my existing building blocks? And what are the implementation plans that I need to build? And who are all the people involved in getting these implementations? And then the last step is, once you have everything implemented, then you need to have a governance in place. So the governance could be something like, so whatever that I've implemented today, is it actually giving me the business value? So you have, before you started your core, your vision, you probably would thought about how my end product should look like. So in this governance steps, you need to have steps and procedures to iterate through all these steps that I just talked about and make sure that you have attained your business value. That's your ultimate goal. So in a nutshell, TOGAF is a framework that helps you attain your ultimate goal, which is the target that you have in mind. And TOGAF gives you various development practices or various phases where you can accomplish your target architecture. So the TOGAF document itself has several pieces or parts in it, which is basically the introduction, the ADM guidelines and techniques, the content framework, the enterprise continuum and tools, the TOGAF reference models, and the architecture capability framework. We'll talk about them next week. So what is an enterprise? So every enterprise, an enterprise is any collection of organizations that has a common set of goals. Example, a government agency, a whole corporation, a division, or a single department within an enterprise. So if you take any enterprise, you have various departments within an enterprise. And each enterprise has, each collection of organizations within an enterprise has its own business purpose. It has its own process and procedures, business processes to implement its ultimate goal. So if you look at organizations today, the reason why most of the organizations do not have a good enterprise practice is because each and every organization within that enterprise work in silos. So each organization has its own set of systems, its own set of people, its own set of processes and procedures, and that complicates how your enterprise architecture should be built upon. So, from my experience, each enterprise today has its own kind of enterprise architectures built within that business unit. So, to achieve enterprise architecture at an enterprise level, each enterprise should forgive or should forego these silos and come together as a team and see what each business unit can leverage from their existing practice. So how do you do that? So one way of doing that is you basically look at your baseline. So the baseline will give you or provide a good indication of what systems and procedures you have in place. So that would be a good starting point. So you can build a mini repository out of your existing procedures, processes for TOGAF. So that gives you a basic building block that you can start with. So what is architecture in the context of TOGAF? So TOGAF has two meanings depending upon the context. It is a formal description of a system or a detailed plan of the system at a component level to guide its implementation. So what this definition or definition of architecture means is basically, it is not talking about tools. Let's use .NET for this development. Let's use Java for any of that. TOGAF is basically a framework at an enterprise level. It's not specifically oriented to your information. It's not specifically just oriented to information technology. It incorporates every piece of your enterprise. So it has the business, it has the IT, it has the project management office, it has the governance office, so the change management board. So TOGAF basically covers all of these business units or business processes or set of people that need to implement TOGAF. So TOGAF basically gives you a detailed plan or a guide to how you want to implement a new system. So another definition of architecture in the context of TOGAF is it's a structure of components, their interrelationships, and the principles and guidelines governing their design and evolution over time. So what basically this particular point is talking about is, so if I have to build a particular component or a particular process, what are all the components that I need to achieve that target? So and during that process, you would ideally have n number of steps to accomplish that. Out of these n number of steps, there might be steps that are interrelated to each other. So this interrelationship is a very important step in achieving your target. So the way I look at it is, if you have to make, you have various, people can make coffee in various other fashions or different ways. So one can have add the coffee powder first, add milk to it, and then sugar. The other way people do it, add sugar first and then coffee first. So you basically have different ways of making coffee. So TOGAF will basically talk about what the best practices for those are. And then it also talks about guidelines where how you want to document all these steps and procedures, and then moving forward, how you want to control it, how you want people to basically how you want people to use these components for future development or future projects. So next question that comes to mind is, why do I need? So what are effective management and exploitation of information through IT is a key factor to business success and an indispensable means to achieving competitive advantage. So today, every organization has a business end user, and then we also have an IT. What I have seen through my years of working in multinational companies is basically the business thinks that IT takes a long time to achieve what they want. So what the business does is they go outside and they determine what products are available that meets their requirement, and basically go and buy those products and implement it without even involving IT. So what does that cost? So whenever there is a problem, the business tend to go to IT and say, I have a problem with this application which I need to get resolved. So IT basically says, okay, this is a product that you purchased even without letting us know. So if I need to provide support to this product, either you have to involve IT right from your requirement phase, and then that would help us in providing better support to the product that you purchased. So that's what, if you note down the bullet point, is a more efficient IT operation. If IT has to achieve that, business has to work or collaborate more with IT. So basically that's what advantages of a good enterprise architecture is. Basically you have a better return on your existing investment, reduced risk for future investment. So what does better return on existing investment mean? So if a business has a particular project that it wants to implement, so you need to identify from the business what are their requirements, and then go through each of the phases of TOGAF to determine what are the existing building blocks that I could use. So basically, and also look at from a revenue standpoint, implementing this particular project, what does it gain to the business and to the enterprise as a whole? What kind of returns do I get? Whether I get good returns in 2 years, 3 years, or 10 years. So that's the kind of strategic decision that the executive sponsor or the business sponsor need to talk about and come to a consensus on. And then the last point is basically it's faster, simpler, and cheaper procurement. So once you have TOGAF in place, basically you can identify what are all the components that are required, what are all your existing vendors that can provide this kind of infrastructure to implement this solution. So once you have a good relation with your vendors, and you probably will end up buying hardware at a cheaper cost instead of going to new vendors all the time. What is an architecture framework? An architecture framework is a tool that can be used for developing a broad range of different architectures. So basically TOGAF is an architecture framework. So it gives you various steps or various phases of achieving your target with different architecture workflows. So it should describe, so what does the architecture framework have? It should describe a method for designing an information system in terms of a set of building blocks, or showing how the building blocks fit together. So what this point is talking about is you need to implement the system in such a way that there are several components that could be used to achieving your target. So don't build, so basically if you talk about in terms of IT, you see a